Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Steel, and the Ministry of Civil Aviation. She is a retired officer for the batch of 1981 of the IED. Policy making, project, program approval, budgetary requirements, assessment for the government programs, evaluation of government programs or projects, and economic analysis have been her primary areas of work. She was mainly implicated in project policy making and skill development in the sector, and it was integral in getting in the National Aviation University off the ground during her last assignment as the senior advisor in the Ministry of Civil Aviation. Additionally, she was successful in increasing the sector's efficiency for air cargo logistics. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well enough. Just give me a nod.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great honor to be here with you all at Kristu Jayanti College. And, of course, I'm the third person speaking on the budget. So you already know what have been the allocations, what have been the implications of the budget of this year. And definitely you are aware that the major thrust has been on infrastructure. And this has been lauded by the corporate sector and others and economists also, because this is major capital spending. 10 trillion rupees for our investment in infrastructure and railways is a major jump. And it's not as if the government had not been focusing on capital expenditure. For the last 4 years, they have been doing that. There has, in fact, capital expenditure has been stepped up, almost trebled in the last 4 years. Whereas on the other hand, revenue expenditures have gone down. Now, what are the implications of that? We will come to a bit later. My topic is basically on what is there for the poor in the budget, if anything. And if there is something, is it enough? And what is it that we need to do further? These are some of the things that I would hope to address in this short meeting with you all. Now, you already know that poverty in India is nothing new. We, according to the multidimensional poverty index by the Planning Commission, which came out in 2021, we find that 25% of people are deemed to be poor. That means a huge number of around 230 million. So this isn't a small number at all. And when budgets are made, we must keep these people in mind, because they are the unorganized sector. They are people who have no voice. Who are the people who will give voice to these people? We must be very sure that in the budget, we have made adequate allocation for their welfare, for their social security, and for their livelihoods. Now, as you know, that India is basically rural-based economy. We have much of our population in the rural areas. Something like 200 million people reside in rural areas. And our per capita incomes also are not very good. At least we have a per capita in real terms, which is 18% below the global GDP per capita. 18% below the global GDP per capita. What does that mean? I mean that we're really down there in the ladder of economics, global economics, and we cannot push this under the rug. We cannot push this under the carpet, or we cannot be ostrich-like and avoid the fact that we have such a large population which are in extreme poverty. Now, the unemployment rate, the last few years has been very difficult. especially the corona time for poor people, because lakhs of people lost their employment, lakhs of people migrated, and they just didn't have any livelihood. So they were forced into migrating to the rural areas, which also witnessed a fall in employment. There was, over labor supply, wages fell further. There was a whole lot of, poverty that was generated. In fact, poverty only increased during those times. And what we see is that around that time, we had not even come out of the demonetization, which had happened. The demonetization kind of, really affected our unorganized workers, our poor people the most, because they always operated on cash basis. So we had not even come out of that when the corona arrived. So the last 2-3 years, there has been only a worsening of the economic situation of those below the 50% of the population. On the other hand, of course, you know right now that the unemployment rates are as high as 8%, and they were even higher during those times. And that was when the actual purchasing power of these people were impacted. And to add to that, uh, high inflation rates over the last 2 years, and especially last year, have as good as, just decimated the purchasing power of those whom we are talking about, the poor in this country. So apart from that, we already know how much of inequality there is in this country. Recently, you would have seen an Oxfam report that said the top 10% in this country have accumulated 77% of the wealth. And we have seen what is happening because of that. If 77%, if the 77% of the wealth is with 10% people, then what do 90% of our people have? 90% have less than 22% of the wealth. Similarly, World Inequality Database also said the same thing. They said that only 1%, the 1% of wealth in certain hands increased to, over 30% in 2020. So we cannot afford that kind of deepening of inequalities. This all results in lowering of consumption demand, which is very important for economic growth. And it is a lot of consumption demand. It is not the kind of consumption demand that you see coming from the rationalization of the tax rates in the budget, for example, because okay, you have rationalized tax rates, brought them down to 5, you have increased the standard deductions, etc. But you have also cut the surcharge on those very rich people. So by cutting down on these tax slabs and giving rebates, you are giving basically these rebates to the richer class. The poor class are unable to get any benefit from that. So the thing is, it is really a shocking state of affairs when we see that only the richer class is getting all the benefits, and the poor sector in this economy is suffering. You have seen that one of the biggest surprises in the budget was the cut in the Manrega outlays. Mr. Chidambaram has been talking a lot about this, as also other opposition parties. I'm not saying that this is a political statement at all, but it is something which we are very much affected by. Why have you decided to cut Manrega outlays? to only 60,000 crore, a cut of about 33%. It's a huge outlay because this Manrega scheme, as you all know, is a social sector scheme. It provides a security net for our unorganized and poor people. And it's not as if that there is no demand for this. There is a huge demand, especially during the pandemic. There was a massive demand for this. It gave employment to about 11 crore people at that time. And in fact, there are still people demanding jobs under Manrega. We have something like 15 crores still employed, on the rolls, who are seeking jobs. So is it not very clear that there are people who are wanting jobs and you are not able to provide it? um, uh, you are also There is also this situation where the Manrega funds get utilized. 80% of the Manrega funds get utilized within 6 months. So if that is the case, what will happen to the next 6 months? Where will the money come from? And even this year, we have an arrears of about 25,000 crores, which has to be met. So the money from this 60,000 crores, 25,000 crore will go for settling arrears. What about the rest of it? I mean, it is true that the FM had to, manage the fiscal deficit and keep it to reasonable levels. But is it okay to cut down on social security for those who it is absolutely required at this point of time when unemployment is high and inflation rates are high? The purchasing power has gone down drastically for them. Now, uh, this was a way, had the Manrega been kept at the level or increased over what it was at the RE level, that is about 89,000 crores. Had it been kept at that level, we would have been able to put more money in the hands of the people. Because after all, what we're looking at is a need for increasing demand in the economy. Unless that happens, all this pump priming of money, this capital expenditure, may not yield the results that we're looking for. Because pump priming and a lot of capital expenditure takes a lot of time over the years to generate the kind of employment that is needed. Of course, in the future it will, but presently, right now, what is the immediate issue is one of unemployment. We need to tackle that. If infrastructure projects cannot tackle it immediately, then we must look at other things. And it may be deemed populist, but we do need to put money in the hands of the people. That is what is absolutely necessary. Because as economics students, you also know that the marginal propensity to consume of the lower classes, lower economically weaker classes is higher. It's not the richer people who are going to be able to spend. Of course, they will buy cars and electronics, etc. But to what extent? And if you were to put money in the hands of the economically weaker sections, each 1 rupee will give them leverage of 65% of it being spent on consumption goods like food and housing, etc. So that kind of propensity to consume cannot come from the richer classes. So in the long run, when we cut down on revenue expenditures, because this is revenue expenditure, by the way, and there are other revenue expenditures which have been cut in the budget. For example, the food subsidy, the fertilizer subsidy. These are it is inherent in our system because we have been a welfare state. We have taken care of our people. We had given them food security. We have tried to during Corona pandemic. The government did a wonderful job by giving free food grains, etc. But what happened suddenly? Are we in such a rush to, rein in the fiscal deficit that we cut down on food and fertilizer subsidies also? About 90,000 crores for, was it, let me just get you the figures. Fertilizer subsidy was reduced by 50,000 crores and food subsidy by 90,000 crores. So you have this Pradhan Mantri Kalyan Yojana, Garib Kalyan Yojana has been discontinued. This was where we used to give free food to the masses. Now, instead of that, that has been shifted to the PDS system of food distribution. Now, if you look at it carefully, you see that the PDS, the allocation for the PDS itself has gone down, because there's been a setback in the procurement of wheat, etc., because of we were exporting wheat for Ukraine. So I don't know why the government has thought of cutting down on PDS infrastructure, which is absolutely must. I mean, the FCI requires to procure and make food grains available, but the allocations have gone down for them. So similarly, price support and reduction for farmers is another amazing and distressing fact that comes out if you look at the budget. After all, there was a farmers' agitation. Everyone knows that they resented the reforms coming in, even though many of us economists said, yes, please do away with the middlemen. It will be good for them. But what they wanted was MSP. You should give us a correct MSP, a reasonable MSP. And over the years, MSP has always been considered by the government as a necessary part of agriculture development. But right now, no price support or the marketing intervention scheme of the government has taken a hit in allocations. In fact, has been reduced. So it is a bit shocking to see the entire panorama of cuts in the budget. And the unorganized and the poor cannot stand up and say, hey, look, you have done injustice to us. Like the rest of the corporate sector. The corporate sector can stand up. They have a great voice. In all budget meetings, you will find them there, post-budget meetings. They say, oh, we did a great job. The government did a great job. But it is this sector which has no voice. Somebody has to give voice to their grievances. And so you'll find trade unionists or some professors from JNU, etc., voicing their concerns. Or we have some people who have journals on this, and they bring it out. But it is not largely talked about. And generally, it is not worth, highlighting, because everybody is so happy with the overall budget. It's a good budget, no doubt. There is a great focus on things that are absolutely needed. Infrastructure has always been the need of a developing economy. It catalyzes growth, it propels growth, green energy, etc. It's absolutely essential. I'm not saying that government has done a good job, and they have also at the same time limited the fiscal deficit at 5.9, and let us hope it is kept that way. But the other thing is, we cannot shut our eyes to the global headwinds. Like the economic survey has said, oh, everything's all right, sab kuch theek hai, and all that. And so the budget also doesn't talk about global headwinds. Those are very serious, because right now there is every possibility of there being a global recession. Everybody is geared for this. Can we say that we are not geared for it just because we depend on our internal market? Are we just not going to focus on our imports? because that is turning out to be pretty heavy for us. Even if you look at it, if you look at the overall global scenario of war, of recession, of high prices, high unemployment, I mean, climate change, it is a situation that is going to impact you and me, but more so those at the bottom of the economic ladder. So we cannot avoid looking at areas which have impacted or don't impact the poor. Now, coming to, if you heard the FM speech, she talks about 7 Saptarishis, and the first one being inclusiveness, where inclusiveness for women, for youth, for farmers, the underprivileged, the vulnerable sections of society. That is number one Saptarishi, and with one stroke we say one thing, and the other, and on the second hand we, make a massive cut on your social security, on your food subsidies. You don't look at what will give people direct employment. In fact, employment in urban areas is even unemployment in urban areas is even higher than rural unemployment. What are we doing about that? Because a lot of economists before the budget were of the view, including Raghuram Rajan, that we should think of a Narega-like scheme for urban unemployed youth, like an urban Narega. And everybody was hopeful that something of this sort would come out and there would be some announcement to that effect. But the fact is that nothing came. And whatever was there was cut down. So it's not a very happy state of affairs. So going from rural development, that is Manreka, of course, the allocations have been highly skewed there. You look at farmers. Farmers have also been given short shrift, because although they have some the hike in their allocation for agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture has been only 4.6%. And the major scheme that was announced is that accelerator fund, agriculture accelerator fund, which is supposed to promote startups for innovations within the agriculture sector. This also is some long-term scheme. It is going to, take off. It will take, at least, I have been in the planning commission, so I know at that time Niti Aayog was planning commission. So I know any scheme from concept to implementation to impact takes a good 2 plan periods. That is almost like 10 years. And most of these schemes which have been announced, whether it is for the agriculture sector, whether for infrastructure, whether for the green energy sectors, they're all going to take that amount of time to fructify. The gestation period is high for these kind of projects. So the immediate impact on on employment will be minimal. So this agriculture accelerator fund is not likely to benefit your a small farmer, which forms about 80% of all the farmers in our economy. So then there is of course, there is the PM Kisan scheme, which is a good scheme, I must say. It's a continuing scheme, and this is perhaps the 4th year that it is being continued. Any farmer owning less than 2 hectares would get, the household would get 6,000 rupees per annum. Would get 6,000 rupees per annum in his account through direct transfers. Now, this 6,000 rupees has been a constant for the last few years. And in fact, there was every need to step up the amount to say about 7,000 or 8,000 rupees. But this was not done. At the same time, in the RE figures, the PM Kisan, they had incurred an expenditure definitely much higher than this. There was no need to reduce it. So, although this is a very good scheme, the government would have done a really good. It would have been a very good gesture on part of the government to have increased the amount under PM Kisan, because after all, it is for the small and marginal farmer. Putting more money, and this is what I'm saying, that it may seem populist. We need to put money in the hands of our people. If we don't do that, we are just ignoring their requirements. We are also ignoring more than 60% of our people who live in poverty. Let us at least put some money in their hands through Manrega, through food subsidies, through these kind of schemes that are encouraging consumption. Um, of course, there is farm credit however, has been hiked to 20 lakh crores in the agriculture budget. So that's good. It depends on whether the small farmer can avail of this credit. Most of the time, it is the large and the middle range farmer who take all of the money from this. The Matsya Sampada Yojana is something which is definitely it's an optimistic scheme that helps to there's some disturbance in the audio somewhere. So this Matsya Sampada Yojana is a very good scheme. I had a look at it. It's for overall improvement of fisheries and productivity in fisheries, and bringing fishermen together to produce high value items, etc. Again, a good amount of 6,000 crores has been kept aside for it, and it's I would say it's a good move, but again, something which will translate over a number of years. It's not going to have any immediate impact. Every year, what the central government has done, and it is my own personal experience, that all ministries keep on adding schemes. One new scheme, one new scheme. So that is what constitutes capital expenditure. Instead of the new scheme, why don't you already integrate it into existing schemes? Because there are a number of schemes on fisheries. There's a separate department of animal husbandry and fisheries, and they have a number of programs. There's no need to announce a new program, because a new program is going to take 5 years to take off, whereas the existing programs are already there. So a trend which has been noticed here is that although there is a great thrust on capital expenditure, revenue expenditures have not come up at all. In fact, they only increased by something like 1%, which is minimal, is astounding. How are you going to maintain the existing schemes which have done well if you don't give adequate, money for those schemes? How will you maintain the structures you have set up if you don't give the money? Or how will you maintain the staff that you have employed if you do not give money? But over the successive 4 to 5 years, we see just a thrust on capital expenditures. This can be worrying. And in fact, revenue expenditures, like I have already mentioned, have already been slashed, especially for Manrega, for food subsidies, fertilizer subsidies, plus other programs which I'll mention later on. Now, this is not a good trend, is what I'm saying, because capital expenditure on the one hand, the government capital expenditure or gross capital formation of the government is only about 10% of GDP, and that is not sufficient to kind of spur private investment. It is not sufficient. It is still a drop in the ocean, because the other major investments in gross capital formation are done by public sector enterprises, and by the private sector. So in all, they are doing about 35%. That is the private sector, and the rest is all household enterprises. So government overall gross capital formation is hardly 10 to 12%, and that is not going to trigger, it will not um, enable the crowding in of private investments. We have seen that over the years, 4 5 years, although capital expenditure has been going up, but private investment hasn't taken off. And this is a finding of CMIE. I just came across it yesterday. I found that to be really eye-opening. So we have to be very careful on cutting down on revenue expenditure, and as is our what we keep doing year on year is by just announcing new schemes, and then we keep on this kind of maintenance expenditure keeps on ballooning over the years. So yes, and since we're talking about farmers, farmers' incomes were supposed to double in 5 years. That was said in 2016. But the rate of growth in agriculture is about 3.5 on an annual basis. And wages are aligned to this growth. So, where are we in terms of doubling farmers' income? I don't think we're anywhere near it. It's going to take time. So it's very easy to put in a lot of money, but the actual growth can only take place when there is sustained investments in certain schemes, rather than scattering a lot of investment in 101 schemes. Let it be more focused. Let it go to where the impact will be the highest. Now, this is about the farmer. What about the allocations to the Women and Child Development Ministry of the government? This also, I find that although it is, women constitute about 48% of the population, and their contribution to GDP is also pretty high. And although we have not really formalized how to, calculate, formalize how to, calculate their actual contribution, but we know it is pretty high, and they are an important part of the economic growth of the country. So, but during the pandemic, it was 80% of the women were the ones who took the job hit. They were laid off, and 80% they accounted for the job losses. And many of them have still not got back into the mainstream. Um, and the participation rate of women dropped to 16%, which is perhaps one of the lowest globally. So we don't have anything very, great to say about women's participation in the workforce in India. The overall scheme allocations for the ministries has been hardly 1.8%, as I could see. And the main scheme that was announced by the FM was the Mahila Samman Savings Certificate. I guess you all know about it. I mean, a woman can put in 2 lakh rupees for 2 years and get 7.5 returns on it. The only thing is how many women can afford it, especially those at the bottom of the ladder. It's a good scheme for women who can manage to put in this money. Then I also noticed that despite the high levels of malnutrition of children and pregnant women, the allocations for the related schemes have been cut. It's a very sad fact that we have cuts in schemes like Mission Vatsalya, Mission Shakti, Sambal, etc., all related to women's safety, uh, women's empowerment, and women development in general. So there's been a cut or hardly any increase at all in any of the allocations. And worst is that social security and welfare measures have also been impacted. There's been reductions in this area as well. So it's not a very good, it doesn't give a very good feeling. There is hardly any place for optimism when you look at it. So, and you'll know that in the unorganized sector, that is the sector which technically doesn't have any legal rights, it constitutes 93% of our working population. And most of the unorganized sector is constituted by women workers. And the worst part is that they get lower wages also. So there has been no effort to improve upon the livelihoods of women at all. In fact, for unorganized sector, there have been cuts. First, we during the this pandemic period when they all migrated to the rural areas, it was very difficult to know who migrated from where, what did he do, what were his skills, etc. So the Ministry of Labor decided to come out with a database for unorganized labor. Now I find, much to my surprise, this was tom-tommed last year, that we have this database for unorganized labor, etc. We're doing this and that. And in the budget, we find that there has been a drastic reduction in the allocation for this database. That means plus the Bima Yojana for unorganized labor. This also has seen a cut. Overall, labor and employment, the Ministry of Labor and Employment has seen a cut in their allocations. It's not a very happy state of affairs. So whether it is the farmer, the woman worker, or the unorganized labor or worker, there have been cuts right across, impacting them in a major way. And it is it is a matter of concern. Now, if we go to the employment generating sectors in the economy, like I've already mentioned, one is of course agriculture, which in terms of employment employs about I think it's about 42% of all the total workers in the country. Next to that is the MSME sector, and especially the micro sector. Micro sector are a subset of the small sector, but they constitute about 90% of the total units of the MSME sector. Now, if I look at the MSME ministry and look at the allocations, it seems to be good. There has been a step up of about 26.7% in overall allocations. And the major highlights is, of course, the credit guarantee scheme, which has been revamped with an addition of 90,000 crores. Now, I would say that this is a good scheme. It has been going on for a number of years, and there has been good offtake on this scheme. But much of the benefits, again, are taken by the medium sector. The MSME ministry means the medium, small, and micro sectors. So much of the benefit of these credit guarantee schemes or any of the schemes of the ministry go to the larger fellows. larger fellows or the medium enterprises, even the also small enterprises, but definitely not to micro. Very little offtake is by the micro sector. I haven't done an analysis on this, but as far as I remember from my days in government, this was always the case. And you know how it is. The more privileged people can always manage the bigger slice of cake. So, in this scheme as well, um, and then a dispute resolution mechanism has also been set up, which is a good thing because MSMEs have always been embroiled in a whole lot of disputes and have been criminalized for very petty things. So there has been reform in this area, and hopefully one would see the results very soon on this. But as far as rural industries are concerned, which is part of the MSME ministry, like khadi and village industries, etc., we find that the allocations have been reduced again. And especially for the flagship scheme known as Aspire, that is rural industries, promotion of rural industries is that scheme of Aspire. They have all taken hits. The allocation for rural industries under Khadi and village industries and Aspire scheme have also taken a hit. So overall, the picture is one doesn't feel very enthused by this kind of allocation at all. But to be fair to the government, I would say that some good steps have also been taken, like the PM Vishwakarma Kaushal Samman package. This is for artisans and craftspersons, so as to help them integrate with the MSME value chain. This is, I think, should again, it's a new scheme, and I know this package, etc., thing takes a lot of time, and most probably I haven't gone and looked at the details of the scheme, but it is certainly going to be done in together with the private sector, and getting people to help the artisan in designing, upgrading his product, in marketing, etc. So overall, it's a good scheme. I would say that this is something which would help our poor artisans and craftsmen. But under the Ministry of Textiles, there is already a development commissioner handlooms and a development commissioner handicrafts. So that scheme, instead of it being started here, could have very been dovetailed with the existing schemes in that ministry. I didn't have time enough to look at what has been done under those two heads out there. But again, I would say that if you already have an existing scheme, strengthen it. Look at it at the end of 5 years. If there is something which is wrong with it, change it. But don't keep introducing new schemes and then committed liabilities, you know, um, that accrue as a result of more and more new schemes. So that is one thing. Then there is also a move to help the 8 million women self-help groups to form larger producer organizations, rather enterprises. This again is something which is definitely worthwhile. Though there are already a number of SHG groups and programs running under the Ministry of Rural Development, also under the Agriculture Ministry. So again, the proliferation of schemes is mind-boggling. We could avoid that, but overall, the impact of this scheme should be good. I would say a thumbs up. I would give a thumbs up for it. Then so much for MSME. I would say it's good, but again, the micro units are unlikely to benefit much from it. Most of the benefits would be taken away by the medium scale industries. Um, What about the other social sectors, education and health? So there's an step up of about 8% in education. But when you look at it, this step up, including the step up, it only accounts for about 2.5 percent of the budget. Globally, this figure is about 8%. So we need to put in a bit more effort as far as our allocations for education are concerned, because right now uh, that is that is one of the priorities for uh, a developing country like us. Of course, we say that um, we are third, we are reaching the top of the heap, 5 trillion economy and third in the overall race. But if we do not give enough focus to education and we keep it at a measly 2.5% of GDP, there is something missing out here. We need to rectify that. And the same kind of um, tendency we see in the health sector. Although the overall increase is about 13% B over B, but the main thrust is on provision of nursing colleges here. And of course, eradication of this sickle cell anemia. These are the main focus of the health sector. But again, as in education, only 2% of the total budget is on health. So this is certainly below global standards. And especially after the pandemic, we should have thought about, beefing up the sector, the pharma and the health sectors much more than what has been done in the budget. So what there were other sectors where we find a cut, like apart from the ones I've already mentioned, agriculture, women, MSMEs, rural development. The others are foreign trade and export promotion. I won't go into the details because time doesn't permit such detailed discussion. Foreign trade and export promotion. Now, much of our exports, as you know, is through our unorganized sector. Handicrafts, carpets, textiles, apparel, etc. This is what constitutes the major part of our exports. But there has really been no major impact by this budget that I see that will take place, because even the revenue expenditures, that is existing schemes, etc., in this sector have also taken a hit. Like I mentioned earlier, labor in employment is shocking, but it has taken a cut also. Like I mentioned, the Bima Yojana for unorganized sector and the Rozgar Yojana all have decreased. The allocations have decreased. So this is a very undesirable trend, and we don't seem to be giving that much importance to the workers in our country. It is a sad state of affairs. Now, apart from this, even pensioners, even that National Social Assistance Program, which is basically pensions for widows and for other pensioners in the country, even that has taken a hit. So your vulnerable sections have been affected. So where is this Saptarishi number 1 inclusive Saptarishi 1, which talked about vulnerable people? You have cut the allocations for pensions, and under this very important scheme, which was making an impact. Not to mention the cut in the allocation for the Ministry of Minorities. That has also gone down. And the important schemes for child nutrition, like midday meal program and the integrated child development scheme, allocations for this have also gone down. Are we not bothered about our children, their future? Why have cuts been made in this? It is a sad state of affairs. Also, the National Livelihood Mission has seen drastic cuts. So overall, what we are seeing here is that knowing very well that we have something like 220 million poor in the country, and we have high rates of unemployment, high rate inflation rate in the country, poor demand, falling purchasing power. We have not really attempted to put any money in the hands of those who require it the most. So there seems to be an imbalance overall in the budget. It is focusing more on capital expenditure, as I've repeatedly been saying. And, uh, you know, thrust on infrastructure is good, but it doesn't provide immediate relief. It gives temporary employment for some time. And then what? Right now, what is required in the situation where we have these global headwinds, and although we have managed our economy pretty well, given the situation, the vulnerable situation, it is necessary for the government to put in some more money in the hands of the people and not remove food subsidies, fertilizer subsidies, or Manrega. The social sector nets have been removed. So this doesn't give a very good feeling. It is something we cannot write home about, and be happy with it. But let me be fair enough and also point out some of the steps that may actually help the poor, which I've already outlined to some extent in what I've already said under various sectors. But some of them are, of course, the credit guarantee scheme, the PM Vishwakarma Kaushal Samman, then assistance to women self-help groups, the Matsya Sampada Yojana, which has a huge outlay, by the way, of 60,000 crores. Then rural housing. This is good. It is not a new scheme, Prime Minister's Awas Yojana. Because construction generates employment. That's one good thing. So having put money in this is something which I would give a thumbs up to. Then rural housing, of course, water supply, the Jal Jeevan Mission also. Then Kisan credit card, which is available to marginal farmers. The Swachh Bharat mission, and of course the thrust on the development of the Northeast. Of course, with an eye to the elections next year, but it is nevertheless there. It's a big jump that we have seen. So are we ending are we close to ending the lecture, or I think questions. Yeah, we can take some questions. So generally, I hope you kind of understood what I've said, is that the focus needs to be on putting money in the hands of our people and those who need it. There are few questions in the chat box now. I request Rebecca to read the questions. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. We are indeed honored to have heard such perspective word from you. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights on what's there in the budget to support the poor. The session is now open for queries. Participants, you can actually put down your questions in the chat box. Ma'am, I just got one question from Tina. Can I read it out now?
Yeah.
Okay. This budget focuses on sustainable cities and climate action in urban meta city. I think the rural sustainable development should also have been invited, which is budget failed to mention above. Also, what about the poverty aviation schemes? The budget speech did not include this. Can you please throw some light on this now? Based
Regarding
on
the
your
first part of your question, yes, there should have been some more focus for greening our rural areas, but then I think it's more urgent in urban areas. Our rural areas are already, better off in terms of environment. But as far as I remember, there's something on biofertilizers under the Agriculture Ministry to push that kind of bioenergy and fertilizers in agriculture. So that goes into your rural sector. Then the second part about poverty alleviation programs, yes, I agree with you. That's what I've been saying. I spoke on the absence of any real good push for poverty alleviation, and that we really need to do it, and make a noise about it. Let it be heard. Let it be known that we are putting this money for improving the conditions of our poor, which of course is not happening. Like I mentioned, the Manrega, the reduction in Manrega is a very bad signal.
Participants, kindly note the feedback form is being posted in the chat box. Kindly fill it. Ma'am, going on with the next question.
Yes.
Today in India, one of the viral problems faced by the youngsters is unemployment. And I think this budget is not providing any clear-cut remedy for this problem. So, ma'am, I would like to know your perspective regarding this issue.
Yes, of course. There no real, this unemployment issue is what I've been talking about. It has not been addressed at all. I mean, not upfront. We have existing schemes, but even the allocations of those existing schemes have been reduced. This unemployment guarantee scheme, the Manrega, was one of the most important schemes of the government. And it had been started by the previous government, but it is an unemployment guarantee scheme. So having this was an important thing, and of course we have it, but we have drastically cut it down. Even when there are about 15 crores of people, unemployed youth, not just youth, unemployed people who are on the rolls demanding work for Manrega. So I do agree with you that enough focus has not been given, and we need to come out more. We should concentrate, on sectors like micro sector, which generates the most employment. Micro sector, agriculture. These two are hitherto, the ones that generate the most employment in the country. Apart from that, of course, you have sectors like the textile sector, construction sector. Of course, for construction, government has put some thrust on it. It's a good point. That's great. But anything else, everything else seems to be missing. So I generally hope that there would be, in the middle of during revised estimates, they may consider some schemes. Of course, they will increase the allocation for Manrega. That is definitely going to happen after the budget. This will happen at revised estimate stage, when the demand for more funds will come in. Already there are arrears of 25,000 crores from previous year. So there is no other way, but they will have to increase the allocation for Manrega.
Ma'am, can I go with the next question?
Yeah, sure.
Can you share your motivation behind becoming an IES officer? What was your journey like? I share the same idea of being IES officer. What guidance and suggestions can you provide? Can we connect to your mail ID or your LinkedIn ID for more career guidance?
Well, I am an Indian Economic Service Officer, and what motivated me was, of course, at that time we were very idealistic youth, I must say. At that time, we wanted to do something for the country. So what best way but then be an economist and give the correct advice. So that's how that's what got me into the service. Uh, of course, if you want to become an IAS officer, Indian Administrative Service officer, you'll have to really work hard, because there's a lot of competition in that. There's a lot of power in being an IAS officer, and there's a lot more you can do. There's tremendous exposure to IAS officers because they work in not only one area but umpteen areas, and they work hands-on at the grassroots level also and at the macro level as well. So definitely you should sit for the UPSC if you want to go ahead, and if you think you would like to be part of the government and be a government servant. You have to be a government servant. You must think of service and not your own promotion. That's very important. And yes, you can get in touch with me anytime on
Ma'am,
LinkedIn.
my question is regarding economic services only. I wanna be
Okay, economic services is a good service in the sense that, if you love your economics, you will be thrown into it when you join the government. And it's not as if it's going to be for a corporate that you're working and you're analyzing the economics of the corporate only. You're looking at macro. So that is very exciting. When you get into the service, you're expected, okay, suppose if you're put into the Ministry of Labor, you are supposed to advise based on the data, the strategies that the department has to take. It's another matter that they don't listen to you. You are an advisor. You are there as an advisor. You're not an administrator. The administration work is generally done by the IAS, but now more and more people from other non-IAS services are also doing this work. We also get this opportunity to work in administrative work. But overall, being an economist is a great boon in the government because there's a lot of data. You're sitting on a gold mine of data. And if you love number crunching, you love it in the government because it's all there. And you have to make well-considered notes. The economic survey is done by the Indian Economic Service people. So it is supposed to guide budget making. This time, I don't know. There weren't any great. They were all very optimistic. The economic survey is very optimistic and didn't say anything much as to what should be done. But generally, the survey is supposed to bring out what are the shortcomings and what we need to do. So overall, it's a good thing, and the service has good promotional, avenues also, and then it has central deputation. That is, you can go to being a director, joint secretary, even secretary level postings are there for you. It's a good service. So you should consider it.
Ma'am, can I read the last question?
Please.
Do you think the government of India has been following a trickle-down strategy?
Has followed a trickle-down strategy. You see, this is more of a top-down strategy, because all this massive capital expenditure coming from the central government is basically top-down. It is kind of a growth strategy of, manage the big things and everything will trickle down. Yes, ultimately they have said that, the government says that the benefits will trickle down. And it's like I said, in my speech, is that everything, especially these capital intensive projects, take time. Gestation periods are high. The impact felt after years. In the government, I have seen it firsthand, that from conceptualization to implementation to outcome, it takes about 7 to 8 years, if not more. So definitely it is top down and trickle down. That is, you have to justify it that way because it has to trickle down. And over the years, hopefully in the next 5 to 7 years, we will find that it has definitely helped.
Thank you, ma'am. Gratitude is the fairest blossom which springs from the soul. I now invite Mr. Rajat from 2nd MA Economics to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good afternoon to one and all present here. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks. I deeply thank everyone on the behalf of Department of Economics, Kristu Jayanti College. First and foremost, it is a privilege to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our estimate resource person, Dr. Renu Singh Parmar, IAS retired, former senior advisor, Ministry of Civil Aviation, Government of India. It's indeed an honor to have you address the gathering with your valuable insight. We thank you on behalf of the Department of Economics, Kristu Jayanti College. I take this opportunity to thank our head of Department of Economics, Kristu Jayanti College, Dr. K. Vinoda Devi, for her endless support and guidance. Thank you, ma'am. I now take the pleasure to thank our faculty members for their efforts, guidance, and encouragement. I thank our tech teams and organization teams for their contribution. Finally, I thank our Jayantians and participants for your patience listening and making the session interactive. Once again, I thank you all. I remain.
Thank
so much, Neema, ma'am.
Thank
for
you.
Your, first of all, the voting that you know, that content, new budget, and your perspective. Thank you so much. Rebecca?
Yes, ma'am. Now we have reached the end of the session. Thank you all for your patient listening. Once again, I thank you all. The host may now end.
Thank you.